They took my phone away at the nursing home they shouldn't have. I recorded everything. Mother, you cannot take care of yourself anymore. Derek barked at me as if I were a stranger, blocking his way, instead of the woman who carried him into this world. An old, useless woman belongs in a place built for old, useless women. His breath smelled of impatience, and he did not even look me in the eyes when he said it. Sabrina, standing half a step behind him, curled her lip in a way she must have practiced in private mirrors. "Go on in, Eleanor," she said, tapping the doorframe of the nursing home with a single perfectly manicured nail. "At home, you are nothing but a burden. We are tired of cleaning up after you. This place can deal with you now." I felt the words land on me like cold stones, heavy, familiar, and undeserved. They had spoken to me like this for years, but hearing it outside a building meant for the forgotten made something inside me shift, the way a thin sheet of ice cracks before a river breaks open. When I stepped toward the lobby, clutching my purse, Sabrina reached in and ripped my phone out with a quick, practiced tug. "Old women do not need phones," she said. "You call us constantly with nonsense. You confuse companies on the bills. You ask questions no one cares about. We are done babysitting." Derek snatched it from her and dropped it into his coat pocket like garbage he intended to throw away later. Lily, my granddaughter, peeked at me from behind Sabrina's elbow. She did not say a word. Children repeat what they hear. And Lily had heard far too often that I was controlling, paranoid, obsessed with problems that did not belong to me. Her silence was not cruelty. It was confusion, slowly calcifying into agreement. They marched me inside, as though performing a chore they had postponed. I walked ahead of them, not because I wanted to, but because it hurt less than letting them push me. The smell of disinfectant pricked at my nose. The check-in clerk did not look up as she slid forms across the counter. Derek signed his name quickly, irritated at the speed of the pen, irritated at me breathing behind him. I stood there, feeling my ribs tighten around my lungs. I told myself not to cry. I told myself I had survived worse. I told myself I was still Eleanor Marsh, but the echo of that name felt faint, like someone calling from another room in another life. Around the 200th word of their insults, it occurred to me that if justice ever found its way back to me, I wanted witnesses. My voice, silenced for so long, deserved amplification. So, to anyone listening now, let me say this clearly. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. When Derek finished signing, he handed the clipboard back without looking up. "She forgets things," he announced to the clerk. "She wanders. She lies. She imagines people are out to get her." Sabrina chuckled. "We tried to care for her. She refuses to be reasonable." She looked at me then, her eyes flat, triumphant. "This is best for everyone." They believed that. They truly did. Their version of the story painted me as the villain. I was the mother who interfered, the teacher who judged, the woman who questioned everything that frightened them. Sabrina resented me for my years investigating child abuse. She called it sticking my nose where it never belonged. Derek hated that I reported his best friend in high school for hitting a younger student. That friend had been arrested, and Derek blamed me for ruining his life. Sabrina still complained that I refused to hand over my retirement money for her cryptocurrency fantasies, as if caution were an insult. Even Lily, sweet Lily, had been taught that my concern was meddling, that my warnings were bitterness, that my memory of events was shaped by spite rather than experience. They did not hate who I was. They hated who they imagined me to be, and it was easier for them to imagine than to remember. When they turned to leave faster than politeness, slower than guilt, they did not say goodbye. Derek tapped his pocket where my phone rested and said, "We will keep this, so you do not bother anyone." Sabrina waved a limp hand, a gesture meant to imply mercy where none existed. They stepped through the glass doors, and for the first time in my life, I watched my own child walk away relieved to be rid of me. As soon as they disappeared into the parking lot, I slipped a trembling hand into the inner lining of my coat and felt the small, cool rectangle hidden there. My second phone, not the new one they stole, but an older model I kept out of habit, tucked into a secret pocket I stitched myself. They had no idea it existed. I clicked the power button gently, shielding the glow of the screen with my palm. My heart thudded, not from fear but from awakening. They thought they had ended my voice. They had only freed it. Why were they so desperate to silence me? What did they think I might say? Or worse, what did they think I might find out? I had spent 40 years of my life identifying danger in shadows, lies in paperwork, bruises behind polite smiles. People had always feared what I might uncover. It appeared my own family feared it most of all, and standing in that lobby, clutching the secret phone against my ribs, I felt the old version of myself, sharp, observant, unwilling to bow, rise again. They did not know it yet, but they had just armed the woman they hoped to bury. People say history gets rewritten by the victors, but in families like mine, it gets rewritten by the loudest, the angriest, the ones who cannot tolerate remembering things as they truly happened. My past did not fade because of age. It was deliberately smudged by the people who benefited from pretending I was someone else. I spent 35 years teaching children how to read, how to speak up, how to tell the truth, even when the truth scared adults. But the part of my career that my family hated most was the part I did outside the classroom. My work investigating suspected child abuse, documenting bruises, collecting statements whispered by frightened little mouths, standing between danger and the children who had no one else. It was work I never bragged about, but it left marks on my life, marks that Derek and Sabrina twisted into weapons. When Derek was young, he used to watch me prepare case reports late at night, asking questions about why some parents hurt their own children. I answered him carefully, never graphic, never too much, but always honest. I thought honesty built resilience. Instead, it built resentment. As a teenager, he began calling me the judge, saying I looked at everyone like they were guilty until proven innocent. Sabrina, when she married into our family, magnified that resentment like sunlight through glass. She told Derek that my moral standards were outdated, that my instincts were paranoid, that I had spent so long investigating danger that I saw it even where it did not exist. She said it so many times that Derek eventually began hearing my voice through her mouth. Once, when Lily was 6, I watched Derek grab her by the arm, too sharply after she spilled juice on the carpet. It was not terrible, not even close to abuse, but it was the kind of anger that could grow if left unchecked. I said gently, "Derek, soften your voice. She is frightened." He spun around as if I had struck him. "There you go again," he snapped. "Always interfering. No one asked you to raise my daughter." The look in his eyes then was not just irritation, it was humiliation, the kind that curdles into hatred. He could not stand the thought of me seeing anything he did as less than perfect, so he decided I must be imagining things. It was easier for him to rewrite the moment than admit he had scared his little girl. My daughter Martha had once been the closest to me. When she was young, she used to say she wanted to grow up and save people the way I did. But somewhere along the way, that admiration calcified into something heavy and sharp. She fell in love with a man who had a long history of drug possession, a man who had lied to her and drained her savings. When I told her gently but firmly that marrying him could destroy her future, she did not argue. She exploded. "You cannot control me forever," she screamed. "You cannot ruin every good thing in my life just because you are afraid." She told everyone I hated him for no reason, that I wanted her miserable, that I meddled because I could not stand to lose authority. None of that was true. I only wanted her safe, but she married him anyway, suffered through 2 years of chaos, and when he finally left her for someone else, she blamed me. Said I cursed her marriage. Said I had poisoned the relationship. She has not spoken to me in 9 years. Every time my children failed, every time their lives tilted off center, they searched for a place to pour the blame, and I became that place. They did not want a mother. They wanted a scapegoat. And Sabrina, with her talent for spinning narratives that excused her own greed, turned my history into a caricature. According to her, I was not a protector, I was a meddler. Not a guardian, I was a tyrant. Not a woman who fought to save children, I was a woman addicted to control. She once told Lily, loud enough for me to hear, "Your grandmother always thinks she knows best. That is why no one wants her opinion." Lily was 10 at the time. Small enough to absorb the comment, old enough to believe it. I watched my own reputation rot inside my family like a fruit left too long on a windowsill. Every act of compassion became suspicion. Every warning became an accusation. Every memory became something to question. They decided that disagreeing with them made me dangerous, that protecting them meant controlling them, that refusing to fund their bad decisions meant I was stingy, selfish, obsessed with power. I carried these distortions with me into the nursing home like invisible luggage. They had stripped me of dignity long before they stripped me of my phone. The tragedy is that they hated me for qualities they never understood: discipline, integrity, caution. But the deeper truth, the one I now saw with perfect clarity, was this: my family could not forgive me for remembering things accurately. They needed the past to bend around their shortcomings. They needed villains, and I was the most convenient one. Standing there with my hidden phone pressed against my ribs, I realized something they never expected me to understand. They feared my history not because it was flawed, but because it was true. And truth, when recorded, becomes something that cannot be rewritten, no matter how loudly the liars scream. The nursing home looked harmless enough when Derek shut the car door behind me. But I had worked with children long enough to know when a building carried a kind of stillness that did not belong. It was the quiet of places where people were managed, not cared for. The receptionist smiled at me with a politeness so practiced it felt like a mask, and the first thing she asked for was my medication list. The second thing she asked for was my belongings. "Phones are not allowed," she said without blinking. "They confuse residents and make documentation difficult." Documentation. A curious word for a place that claimed to help the elderly stay safe. I was assigned to a room that smelled faintly of bleach and something metallic. My roommate, an older woman named Bernice, slept with her face turned to the wall, as if she had given up on the idea that anyone might speak to her. A nurse handed me 2 pills in a small cup without explaining their purpose, and when I asked what they were, she smiled the same plastic smile as the receptionist. "Standard adjustment doses, honey. Everyone takes them the first week." I recognized the irritated edge under her sweetness. People only talk that way when they expect compliance. When I handed the pills back, she frowned. "Refusing medication is a red flag. It will be noted." The threat was subtle, but I heard it clearly. Over the next day, I watched patterns form patterns that reminded me of the institutions where neglected children were hidden away. Lights out at odd hours, meals rushed, questions discouraged, staff members who avoided eye contact unless absolutely necessary. And most telling of all, residents who moved slowly and spoke rarely, as if they were walking through fog. That fog smelled like sedatives, not prescribed thoughtfully, but distributed broadly, conveniently, strategically. They controlled communication with surgical precision. Phone calls had to be scheduled. Visits had to be approved. No laptops, no journals, no photos, and certainly no recording devices. If I had not hidden my second phone deep in the lining of my cardigan, I would have been cut off from the world entirely. Derek and Sabrina knew about my primary phone and made sure it was confiscated at intake. They did not know I had prepared for their betrayal. On my second night, Nurse Dalton came into the room without knocking. She spoke to Bernice as though she were deaf. "Time for your evening dose." Bernice swallowed the pills without question, her eyes vacant, her hands trembling, even though she tried to hide it. I pretended to sleep, but when the nurse leaned over me with her tray, I let my breath stay slow and even until she left. Only then did I reach under my pillow and press the side button on my hidden phone, setting it to record. I had not intended to reveal myself so soon, but the universe often responds to readiness with opportunity. 2 hours later, I slipped quietly into the hallway, pretending to look for a bathroom. Voices drifted from the nurse's station low, careless, believing themselves unwatched. Nurse Dalton's voice was unmistakable. Her son said to keep her calm. He does not want her causing trouble. If she asks too many questions, we mark her as confused. Simple as that. Another staff member murmured something I could not catch, and then Dalton sighed. "Look, they usually send old folks here when the family wants power of attorney. Just document a few lapses, maybe a disoriented episode. As long as it is consistent, it will hold. The words sliced through me with chilling clarity. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a plan. A coordinated effort between the facility and my own children to strip me of legal autonomy. Derek and Sabrina had not just abandoned me here, they had enrolled the staff in a narrative that painted me as incompetent. And if the staff complied, the courts would follow. I braced myself against the wall, feeling my pulse thrum in my ears. For a moment I thought of the children I once protected, the ones whose voices were ignored until someone like me believed them. Now I was the one no one wanted to believe. But I was not helpless, not stupid, and certainly not powerless. When I returned to my room, I played back the recording through a pair of tiny earbuds I kept hidden in the hem of my sleeve. Dalton's voice crackled through the speaker, every syllable clear enough to cut glass. It was evidence. Not suspicion, not speculation, evidence. Something the courts trusted far more than the embellished stories Derek and Sabrina had woven around me. I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone warm in my hand, and let the truth settle into my bones. My family's goal was not simply to silence me. They wanted control of my accounts, my property, and my future by manufacturing my decline. It was a textbook maneuver, one I had once been trained to spot and stop. But this time, the target was me. As I listened again, the most striking part was not Dalton's cruelty, but her indifference. It told me everything I needed to know about the culture of the place. This was not the first time they had done this, and if I did nothing, I would not be the last. For the first time since arriving, I felt something sharper than fear, purpose. They thought I would fade quietly into the background of this place. But the phone they never found, the one nestled between the folds of my sweater, was now the most powerful object in the entire building. It held their words, their crimes, their coordination, and I intended to make every one of those words matter. I first noticed Kira because she did not move like the others. The older nurses walked with a heaviness that came from routine and indifference, but Kira's steps were precise, alert, as if she was always listening for something that should not be happening. One afternoon, while she pretended to straighten my blanket, her voice dropped to a whisper so thin it barely existed. "Mrs. Marsh, they are planning to transfer you to the dementia wing tomorrow morning." My breath caught, not because the news surprised me, but because the confirmation settled every suspicion I had been carrying like lead in my chest. I asked her why in a steady voice, though my pulse hammered against my ribs. Kira swallowed hard. "Once you are in there, you lose your legal capacity. No court will question it. You will not be able to sign for your own finances. Your family will." She hesitated, then added with a mixture of anger and pity, "Do not let them put you there. No one comes back from that wing with their rights intact." The warning pushed me from fear into strategy. That night, long after the hallway lights dimmed, I retrieved the miniature phone from the seam of my sweater, the one small device Derek and Sabrina had not managed to rip out of my hands. I activated the audio recorder and tucked it behind the loose tile under my bed. The next morning, I pretended to shuffle slowly to the nurse's station, letting my steps appear confused while my mind cataloged every detail. I recorded the argument between two aides about medication dosages, the careless way they mixed up charts, and the moment a nurse named Alma muttered, "No one checks the evening meds anyway. Just sign it off." I filmed her through the gap in the door frame, her hands moving pills from one cup to another, barely glancing at the labels. But the most damning evidence came 2 days later, when I heard Supervisor Brandt speaking near the loading dock behind the building. His voice carried without regard for who might be listening, "Mother of God, these old folks do not need to live this long. Half of them do not even know where they are. Just give them the damn meds and keep the complaints off my desk." The dismissiveness in his tone was almost casual, as though he were discussing defective inventory instead of human beings. I held the phone steady inside my pocket, recording every hateful syllable. The more I listened, the clearer the pattern became. They wanted residents docile, silent, compliant. They sedated anyone who asked questions and labeled anyone who resisted as declining. My evidence was growing, but so was the timeline. They were moving fast, and I needed to stay one step ahead. Kira found me later that evening in the laundry room, her eyes darting toward the security camera before she stepped closer. Her voice trembled, but her words were deliberate. "There is something else you need to know." She checked the door again. "The nursing home is part of a cost reduction program. They get bonuses for transferring residents to higher dependency care. The earlier they can move someone to the dementia wing, the more money they save." I felt the cold edge of recognition slice through me. "And my family?" I asked. Her silence was the answer before she spoke. "Your son signed a consent form for special long-term supervision. It gave him a 40% discount on your monthly fees." She looked at me with something close to grief. "He agreed to it knowing the only way they justify that classification is by declaring you incompetent." The world did not tilt or collapse. It simply fell into place with a clarity that hurt more than shock. Derek had not just abandoned me. He had sold me. My worth had been calculated, adjusted, and discounted like a defective piece of equipment. It explained the rush to take my phone, the eagerness to get me out of the house, the impatience when I questioned their decisions. They needed me powerless so they could benefit from my decline, manufactured or not. I steadied myself against the dryer door, the metal cold under my palm. That was when Kira leaned in and whispered, "I do not think they expect you to fight back." Her words ignited something deep in my chest, something my years as a teacher had never allowed to die. The kind of resolve that rises when someone believes you are too small to resist. I pressed the recorder again, feeling its soft vibration as it captured the truth line by line, voice by voice, lie by lie. Every whisper in the hallway, every falsified chart, every careless confession. They thought they had buried me in silence. But I had spent my life exposing the things people tried to hide. This time would be no different. Derek and Sabrina showed up 3 days after the staff tried to reroute my medication, walking into my room with the smug confidence of people who believed the world and the law existed to favor them. Derek did not even pretend concern. He looked around my room like an inspector evaluating damaged goods. "Well," he said, exhaling sharply, "at least they are keeping you contained. That is a relief for everyone." His tone carried the same annoyance he used when speaking to a dog that chewed on furniture. Sabrina stood behind him, arms crossed, lips curved in a smile just slightly too wide, predatory, rehearsed, eager. "We were just discussing your finances," she said lightly, as though the topic were weather. "It really is for the best that someone sensible handles things now." She took a step forward and leaned down, close enough for her perfume to burn my nose. "Stay put, Eleanor. You are safer here, and soon everything you own will be managed by people who actually know what to do with it." The contempt dripping from her voice was almost theatrical. Derek chimed in quickly, like he could not stand to be outdone. "You can throw your little accusations around if it makes you feel important, but nobody believes you. The whole family knows you are paranoid. Frankly, the staff sees it too." He shrugged, as if dismissing an insect. "You had a good run, Mom, but you are not the narrator of your life anymore. We are." My heartbeat stayed steady, though inside I could feel that needle of steel, the one that always woke when someone underestimated me. I pretended confusion, squinting as if I struggled to focus on their faces. I tilted my head and muttered, "What was that? Say it again, dear?" "I cannot hear well today." Sabrina smirked, delighted by what she believed was weakness. She stepped even closer, her breath hot against my cheek. "I said you should just accept this. Once Derek signs the incapacity papers, the house is mine. I am tearing it down and building Airbnb units. You do not need to live much longer to see it anyway." Her whisper was poison delivered with sugar, low enough to sound secret, cruel enough to reveal her intentions fully. What she did not know was that the tiniest phone in my pocket vibrated once, confirming the recorder was running. Derek joined her, lowering his voice but not his arrogance. "Honestly, it is better this way. You would only get in the way. We will handle your estate, and the doctors will back us up. They always do. Old people lose track of reality. It is normal. Besides," he added with a smirk I could hear more than see, "no judge believes a woman who thinks everyone is conspiring against her." Their words spilled out effortlessly, the way truth often does when evil grows comfortable. They thought I was deaf. They thought I was broken. They thought the world had already declared me irrelevant. I let my face slacken slightly, widening my eyes just enough to sell the performance. "You two are so sweet to visit," I said softly. "I am glad you are handling things." Sabrina patted my shoulder with a mock tenderness that made my skin crawl. "Good girl," she murmured, as if praising a dog for staying still. Derek chuckled. "Finally some sense." He glanced at the door, lowering his voice further. "Once the paperwork goes through, we can move her to the advanced care wing. They do not allow phone calls there at all. She will not be able to bother anyone," Sabrina added, laughing quietly. "She will forget she even had a house. Honestly, she already does." She nudged him playfully. "I told you she would not fight back," Derek replied. "She cannot. That ship sailed years ago. Every word was captured, every insult, every confession, every piece of the trap they were building for me." I sat still, letting them talk themselves deeper into their own grave. Their arrogance was my greatest ally. It loosened their tongues, sharpened their cruelty, made them overconfident enough to expose themselves completely. After a long, satisfied sigh, Sabrina straightened up and smoothed her blouse. "Well," she said brightly, "we should get going. I have a contractor coming tomorrow to look at the property. You know, for the demolition." Derek nodded and gave me a small, dismissive wave. "Bye, Mom. Try not to cause trouble. It will only make things harder for everyone." When the door finally closed behind them, the silence thickened around me, vibrating with the echo of the final, unmistakable truth. My son and his wife had not simply abandoned me. They had already written the ending they planned for me. But they had made one mistake. They spoke too close, too openly, too carelessly, and I had recorded every damning word. Their confidence was their downfall. Their mouths had handed me the weapon I needed. In that quiet room, with the faint hum of the air vent overhead, I held the phone against my chest and whispered, "Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Sabrina. You have no idea what you just gave me." The war had begun. But they had already lost the first battle. I waited until lights out, when the hall settled into that eerie hush nursing homes have at night, a mix of forced peace and hidden desperation. My heart beat steadily, not with fear but with purpose. I pressed the tiny phone against my chest and whispered, "Kira, now." 10 minutes later, she slipped into my room like a shadow, her eyes nervous but determined. "I transferred all the files," she whispered. "Audio, timestamps, the supervisor's comments, everything. They are backed up on 2 drives. One is already off-site." I felt a tightness in my chest ease. "Good girl," I murmured. "Now we send them farther. Together, we push the evidence out into the world." I emailed the recordings to the state's Elder Protective Agency, attaching a brief note. "I am not confused. I am in danger." Then we forwarded the files to a legal aid organization specializing in elder abuse. And finally, my hands trembling just slightly, I sent a message to Martha. I had not spoken to her in years, not since she threw her life into the arms of a man whose criminal record I pleaded with her to reconsider. She had chosen him. He left her in pieces. But she blamed me for warning her, not him for harming her. When I hit send, I did not know whether she would open the message or delete it the way she had deleted every voicemail I'd left her over the last decade. That night, as I lay in the hard twin bed, listening to the hum of the fluorescent hallway lights, I felt something shift inside me, the quiet rage of someone who has been silenced too long, finally learning to roar, not with volume, but with strategy. It was only a matter of hours before everything snapped. I did not expect her to come so quickly, but some truths travel faster than silence ever could. Martha arrived the next morning at dawn. She did not call, she did not knock, she simply appeared in the doorway, wearing a stiff blazer and a guarded expression. For a moment I thought she might hug me, but she stayed where she was, arms crossed. "I came because your message said it was urgent," she said, voice clipped. "So, let us be clear. I am not here to make amends. I just need to see whether you have actually lost your mind." The words sank in like small knives, sharp but unsurprising. I had always been the easiest villain for her to choose, easier than choosing herself. I nodded slowly. Then sit, I said. Listen. Decide whatever you want afterward. She perched on the edge of the chair as if afraid it might stain her. I opened the recording. Sabrina's voice filled the room, instantly venomous, confident, unfiltered. Once Derek signs the incapacity papers, the house is mine. I am tearing it down. She does not need to live much longer anyway. Martha froze. Her jaw tightened. She leaned forward slightly as the next part played Supervisor Brandt, snarling about bothering old people with extra days of life. Nurse Dalton mentioning Derek's request to label me incompetent. And finally, Derek's own voice dismissing me as irrelevant, useless, and ready to be locked away. When the recording faded into silence, Martha did not speak, not for a long time. She covered her mouth with her hand, as though trying to keep something inside from breaking loose. "They said this?" she whispered, her voice thin and shaking. "They said all of this to you?" I nodded again. Her face went through a dozen stages: confusion, disbelief, dawning, horror, and then something deeper, more painful: recognition. "Mom," she said slowly, "I knew they were selfish, but this?" Her voice cracked. "They want you declared incompetent? They want you drugged? They want you gone?" I waited, letting her reach the end of her own denial. She stood up abruptly and began pacing the small room. "I should have been here," she whispered. "I should have checked on you. I should have known something was wrong." Then she stopped and looked at me in a way she had not looked at me since she was a child, like she needed me, like she remembered who I was before resentment rewrote our history. I thought you were trying to ruin my life," she confessed quietly. "But they are the ones trying to ruin yours." I studied her carefully. "What matters," I said, "is whether you believe me now." She swallowed hard. "I do," she answered. "I believe every word." She sank back into the chair, her face pale but resolute. "And I am going to help you, whatever it costs." It was not a sentimental reunion. It was not forgiveness wrapped in ribbons. It was a battlefield alliance born from the truth finally cutting through years of fog. She took my hand, squeezing it more firmly than I expected. "They have no idea what is coming," she said. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something like strength return, not because I suddenly had an army, but because I finally had a witness. Someone who saw what they had tried to bury, someone who would fight beside me. The night had shifted the ground. The trap they built for me was about to collapse beneath them. And as Martha began drafting a legal plan aloud, her voice sharp with fury, I realized something with quiet certainty. They thought they had cornered an old woman, but what they had actually created was a case. And a case is something I have always known how to win. They called it a care review meeting, but it felt more like a tribunal. The room was cramped, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, yet every person sitting around that table carried enough authority to change the course of my life. Representatives from the State Health Bureau, 2 officers from the Sheriff's Department, a lawyer from the Elder Protection Unit, the Nursing Home Administration, and finally, Derek and Sabrina, seated together as if they were the injured party. I walked in with Martha beside me, her jaw tight, her eyes sharp. Derek leaned back smugly when he saw me. "Mom," he said, shaking his head slowly, "you should not have dragged everyone into your delusions. You are embarrassing yourself." Then he turned to the officers. "She has been confused for months. She makes accusations when she forgets where she puts things. I promise you, none of this is real." Sabrina gave a pitying laugh. "Honestly, I am surprised she even remembers why she is here." The administrator, Mr. Corbin, cleared his throat, ready to begin. "Mrs. Marsh," he said, "there have been serious concerns raised about your cognitive stability and your perception of the care we provide. Today is your chance to clarify." Derek cut in, too eager. "She cannot clarify anything. She does not even know what day it is half the time. She should not be allowed to make her own medical decisions." He looked at me with a grin that had no love in it. "Mom, just admit you made this all up." I set my purse down but did not sit. My hands were steady, my spine straight, my breath calm in a way only truth can grant. Derek, I said quietly, are you absolutely sure you want to stand by that statement? He scoffed loudly. I am sure you cannot prove anything, Sabrina added. The only thing she has is her imagination. The elder protection attorney looked at me. Mrs. Marsh, do you have evidence to present? I reached into my purse, pulled out the small phone, and placed it in the exact center of the table. Derek's smile twitched. Sabrina blinked, confused. What is that supposed to be? She asked. I met her eyes. Proof, I said. Then I pressed play. Her own voice filled the room first, so unmistakably hers that she paled before the first sentence even finished. Her sneer echoed over the speakers. Once Derek signs the incapacity papers, the house is mine. I am tearing it down. She does not need to live much longer anyway. Derek shot upright in his chair. That is out of context, he barked, but the recording continued mercilessly, piling their own words on top of them like dirt on a grave. Derek's voice next, cold, dismissive, dripping with contempt. She is basically dead weight. The sooner she is declared incompetent, the sooner we can move on. Then Nurse Dalton's voice joined the chorus, confirming their arrangement. Her son said not to let her cause trouble. Just mark her as confused. It will keep things simple. And then the worst of them all, Supervisor Brandt, bragging without shame. These old folks do not need all these meds. A little extra keeps things quiet and cuts costs. The room went utterly still. Sabrina's chair scraped backward as she stood, shaking. That is fake, she edited that, she shouted. One of the officers shut her down immediately. Ma'am, sit down, now. Derek was sweating, his bravado leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. She must have tricked us, he stammered. She is manipulative. She has always— The elder protection attorney raised a hand. Mr. Marsh, the audio contains clear timestamps, ambient background consistency, and identifiable speaker verification. Unless you can provide evidence of tampering, this stands as authentic. Sabrina sank back into her chair. Mr. Corbin, the administrator, looked as if someone had knocked the wind out of him. Supervisor Brandt, he said slowly, you are suspended effective immediately pending investigation. Brandt's jaw dropped. What? You believe her over your own staff? The officer beside him answered, we believe the recording that includes your exact voice encouraging medical neglect. He reached for his cuffs. Stand up, sir. Then the attention turned back to Derek. Mr. Marsh, the attorney said, your statements constitute evidence of coercion, intent to defraud, and elder endangerment. Derek's mouth trembled. I did not mean it. She is exaggerating. She provoked us. The officer stepped forward. Sir, you are not under arrest at this time, but you will be charged and barred from acting as your mother's guardian. Sabrina's fate came harsher. The attorney tapped the table. Mrs. Marsh, your statements clearly outline premeditated financial exploitation. You will be taken into custody for processing. Sabrina's breath hitched, and for the first time in her life, she looked afraid. Truly afraid. Derek, she whispered, do something. But Derek could barely lift his head, and then something unexpected happened. Lily, who had been waiting outside with a staff member, must have heard the shouting. She burst into the room, saw the officers, saw her mother crying, saw her father shaking, and then saw me small, silent, and steady. Her eyes filled instantly. She ran past them, past their outstretched hands, and threw her arms around me so tightly I felt her heartbeat shaking through her ribs. Nana, she cried, I am so sorry. I did not know. I did not know. I held her close, smoothing her hair, feeling the tremors of a child who finally saw truth for the first time. It is not your fault, I whispered. None of this is yours to carry. The officers escorted Sabrina out in handcuffs. Derek was ordered to remain seated for further questioning. The administrators were informed that the facility would undergo a full state investigation, and as all of it unfolded around me, the consequences, the humiliation, the unraveling of their lies, I felt no triumph, only a steady, righteous calm. Justice was not loud. Justice was precise, and it had arrived right on time. The morning after the confrontation, they moved me out of that place before sunrise. They did not even try to hide the urgency. 2 state officials escorted me to the car themselves, apologizing again and again for what I had endured. I did not need their apologies, but I accepted their sincerity. It felt strange to breathe air that did not smell of bleach, sedatives, and fear. When we arrived at the new care facility Martha had chosen, the difference struck me immediately. People spoke gently. They used my name, not my room number. They asked what I wanted, instead of telling me what I would get. For the first time in months, my shoulders loosened. Martha handled the paperwork with a steadiness I had not seen in her since she was a teenager. When she finally came into my room, she looked at me as if truly seeing me for the first time in years. "Mom," she said quietly, "I do not know how you survived what they tried to do to you." I gave her a small smile. "I survived worse, you just did not know." She sat down beside me, folding her hands in her lap. "I am going to testify," she said. "I will not let them twist your story again." There was a strength in her voice that made something inside me unclench. For so long I believed I had lost her forever. Maybe I had not. Maybe truth had a way of repairing what time and resentment nearly destroyed. Within a week, investigators came to interview me. They were meticulous, patient. They reviewed every recording, every timestamp, every whispered threat Sabrina thought would disappear into the air. The younger officer looked horrified when he heard Dalton recommending that I be marked as confused for convenience. The elder abuse attorney shook her head when Brant's voice bragged about drugging residents to cut costs. They told me this case would set a precedent. I told them I wanted only one thing: protection, not revenge. But justice has a way of multiplying. The nursing homes board suspended 3 supervisors. State audits began immediately. Families of other residents started calling the hotline, finally brave enough to say they suspected neglect too. And because Derek and Sabrina's voices were unmistakable on my recordings, their legal consequences came swiftly. I did not attend the hearing, but Martha told me Sabrina cried hysterically when the charges were read. Derek tried to blame her, then tried to blame stress, then tried to blame me. None of it worked. They had built their own trap, word by word. Meanwhile, Lily visited me every Saturday without fail. The first time she walked in, she held a drawing of me, not the frail woman they wanted people to believe I was, but me standing strong with a phone held high like a lantern. "You are brave, Nana," she whispered. My throat tightened. Children see truth more clearly than adults ever do. I hugged her and told her I hoped she would never fear her own voice. Life at the new facility settled into something gentle. I planted herbs on the balcony. I joined a book circle. I began helping staff create a training module on recognizing subtle signs of elder coercion. They said my story would help protect others whose families tried to silence them. That thought anchored me, more firmly than any apology ever could. Martha dropped by often. Sometimes we talked about the investigation. Sometimes we talked about ordinary things like recipes or weather or memories of her childhood. Once she said, "I used to think you tried to control everything. Now I realize you were the only one trying to prevent disaster." I answered, "It is not too late for us." She reached for my hand without hesitation. "I know." Weeks later, I testified in the official inquiry. My voice did not shake. Not once. I described exactly what they took from me: my phone, my independence, my dignity, and exactly how I took it back. When I finished, one of the board members said softly, "Mrs. Marsh, you have done a great service." I nodded, but inside I felt something more profound: closure. Now I sit by the window of my new room, watching the light change across the floor. I am not afraid. I am not silenced. I am not alone. My family, at least the part that matters, knows the truth. The rest can live with the consequences they earned. People often think taking a phone from an old woman is a small thing. They are wrong. A phone is a voice, a witness, a shield. And so I end my story with the truth that carried me through every dark hallway and every whispered threat. They took the phone from my hand, believing they had taken my voice with it. But it was that voice, quiet, steady, and recorded in the dark, that buried their cruelty once and for all. And that, my dear listener, is the story of how one quiet old woman refused to disappear, refused to be rewritten, refused to let cruelty win. If you have stayed with me until now, then you already know something important. Strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides in a pocket-sized phone. Sometimes it rises only when the world pushes it down too hard, but it rises. If my story touched you, or reminded you of someone who deserves to be heard, then come sit with me again next time. I still have many stories, some painful, some healing, all true. Your company means more than you know. And before you go, sweetheart, make sure you subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Your support keeps these memories alive, keeps justice echoing, and keeps this old heart warm. I will be waiting for you.